All right, everyone. Our next speaker is Amy Marrich, a true open source champion. By day, she's a principal technical marketing manager at Red Hat. Beyond that, she wears many other hats: chair of the CentOS project, vice chair of the Open Infrastructure Foundation Board, and active contributor to several community projects. Amy's here to share why joining a community isn't just beneficial, it's essential. She'll also touch on how mentoring and onboarding new members help communities thrive. By the end of her talk, you'll see just how much your involvement matters and how you can contribute to community growth. So let's give a warm welcome to Amy Marrich with her talk, Why You Should Join a Community.
Is it working now? Okay, here we go. So so this is normally a lightning talk. It was originally submitted in the Open Infra track, and Brenna pulled it out for y'all. So we will be interactive. We will have plenty of time for questions and answers. If I don't cover anything, please feel free to grab me outside. I believe I'm helping with resumes or possibly interviews. If not, you can find me at the Red Hat booth, the Fedora booth, or maybe sliding over to the Open Infra booth because we've got 3 booths here. All right, so my name is Amy Marrich. Yes, I still am on IRC, though it is now bridged to Matrix. That's because that's where the Open Infra community is. We are on OFTC. I know I should update it to say X. I'm not really there all that often anymore, but I am Spots with 2 Z's and an underscore. On GitHub, I am Spots, which is where I normally put any previous talks. I'll put the slides up as PDFs and things like that. I also have Spots with 2 Z's over there. That's more work related. And that is my email address should you need to get to me. They have a really weird place for this. Okay, so what we're going to go over, roles in communities. Just so you know, all communities do not have the same roles. Sometimes it's based on the size of the community, as we'll go over that, but it's also like who's contributing into the community. We're going to do a walkthrough history. It's my graphical experience in here. Just showing you how things have changed from the beginning of open source to today. How you can give back. Actually, no. What does being part of a community for me? So what are you going to get out of joining an open source community? And then lastly, how can I give back? So if you are involved in a community, how you can give back, or if you join one, you get involved, how you can give back to that community, and then we'll have Q&A time. So before I start, how many people are involved in open source already? Okay, so I consider running meetings, attending meetings, documentation, code contributions, you run the infrastructure. And we'll go over some of these things later in the different types of roles. You do graphic work. So anything that gives back to a community is being a contributor. Some communities don't go that broad. Good ones will. Now I do want to, besides the intro that I was given, I just want you all to know I am a graduate of the University of Florida with a degree in animal science and extension education and a master's in extension education. I took a couple computer classes, but that was not my main focus. I was pre-vet. So you do not have to have a technical degree to be involved in open source or to get a job in tech. And I think that's important to point out. So let's go over some of the roles in communities. Now, these are roles that are typically in every community. Your developers, and that can be coding and bug fixes. Yes, open source development really relies on code contributions, operators and other developers providing bug fixes. So yes, if you're running the code and you notice something's wrong and you know how to fix it, we would love the contribution. Reviewing and testing code. I do a lot of reviews. I am a fast reviewer. I review I can review Python, Ansible, other languages, Markdown, anything. But I don't consider myself a developer. Even though I have Python code within OpenStack in one of the security projects, which I laugh about because I have Python code in Barbican. I've also got some code in Cinder and Nova that is Python, but that is not my forte. But if I can see where the code is going, I can review it, and I can also what I call hacking it. And testing code, again, that goes back to the operators. Or you're running through the documentation. You're testing the code while you're doing that. So giving feedback on that and submitting bugs for that is vitally important. Collaboration and community management and engagement. That's where I shine. I say my superpower is not necessarily knowing the answer, but who you should connect with. I can get you the answer. I know who to talk to. And community engagement is also what we're doing at like the Fedora booth up there. We're talking to you. We're telling you about our project. We're hoping you'll join our project. I had the realization earlier today that we've got a scan up there for getting a Fedora badge. If you're in the Fedora project, you've got an ID, we collect badges. Even if you didn't stop by the booth to talk to anybody, and you're here from the Fedora project, you're going to go up there and get that badge, that scan, that tells us you're here. You know, that says, hey, we had community members here that maybe we didn't reach out to properly and let them know we were going to be here, but it helps grow the community. Documentation and tutorials. When you run through that code, is our code good? I mean, are our documents helping you to run that code? Where are we lacking? You're doing a configuration of, say, OpenStack, and you notice something's wrong. We skipped a step. Helping us fix that documentation is very, very important. Tutorials, you know, how to use the software. Sometimes developers don't think about, you know, they're so focused on their use case that they may not do enough of a high level documentation, and tutorials on how to use stuff is vitally important. And one thing I don't have here, actually I'll do it somewhere else. Operators and users. So again, utilizing and testing the software, because you have your very own use cases of how you are using it for yourself or your company, and the developers may not even think of using it that way. Reporting those issues and providing feedback, and the possibility of you putting in a bug because you found it while you were using it. Participating in discussions. If we don't know how you use your software, we cannot develop it to your use. The OpenStack community has something called the Project Teams Gathering, which is basically, it's now virtual versus in person, but those are our working sessions. That's where we get feedback and communication, even between different developers sometimes. Again, I mentioned creating documents and tutorials because you're actually the user, so you might notice things, a configuration switch that is useful for you and you think it's important for the community, so you're going to add it into the documentation or create a tutorial on it. Leadership. Facilitating collaboration. So I'm going to use the OpenStack community as an example. We have individual projects. Compute, for example. In that project, we have different levels of leadership. We have ICs, contributors. We have what we call core reviewers. Think of those as your maintainers. They have the ability to send your patch through. But then we have someone overall in charge of the project called a project team lead. Think of a project manager. In some cases, we have a distributed leadership model where different people in that project take a leadership role and have a function. Setting and communicating a vision, because like I said, you may be the project manager of that project. So You're listening to feedback, you're looking at blueprints, you're looking at specs, and you're helping to decide what can be done in that release cycle, what is feasible for that project, what fits in the overall vision of the software. Nurturing community growth. If you're a leader in the community, you represent that community. So any conversations you have, it could be on board, you could end up onboarding the next great leader in your community, the next great developer, or someone who's going to go back and run your software. And then overall coordination and organization, conflict resolution and mediation. So someone's put up a patch, they don't agree with the reviews on it, so you may need to step in and get everybody together and just talk it out and figure out, where the one person's coming from and where the reviewers are coming from and get resolution. And lastly, kind of mentioned it, guiding the technical discussion. So, we go off on tangents in our meetings all the time. So you are going to bring the conversation back and go, okay, we're working on our back, which is basically role security that can be changed so that certain people have different roles based on permissions based on their roles. And you may need to just bring that conversation around and go, okay, this is the aspect of it we can work on this cycle. How should we be working on it? Let's have a discussion. Now, additional roles in some communities, technical writers. Technical writers are worth their weight in gold because we're not all great writers. So documenting project features and functionality. Again, we encourage the developers and the users to do it, but a doc writer is going to spend time and actually make sure everything's in there and it's worded properly and it's clear for people. They manage and maintain that documentation. Creating developer resources, and a lot of the projects do that themselves because they may use, going back to OpenStack, we have something called DevStack, which a lot of the developers develop on. It's a little OpenStack that runs as an all-in-one, and they can configure different projects in it, and they can actually put their code in there and test it manually to see that it's working. And again, supporting community engagement. I mean, everything goes back to supporting community engagement. So infrastructure I mentioned. So a lot of the projects have their own infra. So system administration, keeping the gating systems up and running, doing the maintenance on those, deploying and doing configuration management, make sure that everything runs properly and the same, whether you are in Rackspace or VexHost or OVH. Overseeing the CI/CD, because you live and die by your gating and making sure that your code works. In this case, we're also talking basically GitHub Actions, but at a really large scale. Scalability and performance optimization, because like I said, we're talking using different public cloud hosts to do our CI/CD, so we have to tweak stuff, if we have a feature that we notice is taking too much RAM, we're going to play with the optimization. So when I mentioned earlier when we were talking about, what makes a contributor, and I mentioned graphic artists. OpenStack community is very fortunate. It's underneath the Open Infra Foundation, and they will provide our graphic work. But not everybody's that lucky. Within CentOS, we do have one person in our artwork SIG. He does our logos. He'll help us with branding materials. Sometimes, and this is more of Fedora, there's people who are interested in creating the user interface and improving the user experience. When you have something graphical, you really need it to be user-friendly and make sense for a user. It could mean looking at the user interface and saying, you've got that button on the left, it really should be on the right. Designing the promotional materials that you are bringing to the conferences, and providing visual assets for documentation. You know, the graphic that shows your your networking structure. It's really great if someone who knows how to do that is making it for you versus just using ASCII to draw it. Translators. Again, another thing that is worth their weight in gold if you are universal. The ability to get your documentation translated, local user interfaces, so you put codes into the code itself, which then goes to the translation system, and then even your log messages could be translated. The ability to have your project communications translated. Hey, we're sending out a newsletter. Oh, great, let me go ahead and translate that into Korean. And let's be real, we might attempt to do the translation, but your translation team are the ones who are going to review and fix your translations. Community advocates, again, community engagement and support. The people who go out to the events or speak at meetups, organize the meetups, outreach and promotion. If no one knows your project exists, you know, no one's going to be using it. Building the community, organizing dinners while you're all together, and so on. And then feedback collection and communication, surveys. We love surveys. Why? Because that's the only way sometimes we get any feedback if people aren't providing it through discussion. And promoting diversity and inclusion. And I'm going to still say that in the US right now. So you want a wide range of people in your community because everyone brings something important to the table. Me and my animal science degree looks at something very differently than someone with that engineering degree. And if you ever go to an OpenStack TC meeting, you see us arguing. Because I think of things from the user aspects versus the developers who think of the code. Great example of that is OpenStack was going to move away from named releases because it's a hard process when you have to go through legal. I really, really wanted OpenStack Yoda. I knew it wasn't going to go through. I thought Yeti would. We ended up with Yoga. So there's a whole process to it. So more engineers wanted to go to number releases. So we're technically a number release, but the foundation took over dealing with legal. So we also have a name. Because when you ask someone when they joined the community, I'll tell you my first release was Grizzly. I know the name of my release. I can't tell you what year it was in. So this is my graphical part, the walk through history. So in the beginning, if you build it, and I got my caveman, they will come. So why do I have a duplicate of this? We have more cavemen, I think, coming up. They will come. So we had an extra slide. All right, so here's our users. And let's be real, a lot of the early developers and users were all men. A lot of times I was the only female on a staff, on a crew, doing operations. So it's not that they were cavemen, but it was a good example because we're going through the ages. So I don't say that they are cavemen. But then there were more communities, not just a single developer with an open source project. And it wasn't just for developers anymore. So we started, as communities grew, we got different roles. And we had more representation. And where we are today, communities are for everyone. And you can be anywhere. So all right, so what does being part of a community mean for me? It's real world experience. Contributions are examples of your work. It's something you can put on your resume, put your GitHub link, show people what you did. Participation can be referred to as experience. Hey, I've been contributing to this project for a year. You can see my work. I've taken these leadership roles. I've done this. I've done that. Networking. the people you meet are sometimes more important than anything else. So it might be someone who is willing to act as your referral. Because I know Krista's here. Yeah, I've been working with Krista in the Linux community for 5 months. She has organized this, that, and the other thing. She's contributed documentation. Yeah, I would definitely hire her. You know, it's given you a relationship that can act as a referral. Now, another aspect of it is connections. Like I said, I may not know the answer, but I probably know the person who does, and that also works with jobs. My company is hiring. Your work is great. Why don't you send me my resume? We've got a junior position opening up. Or I was talking to Bob over lunch the other day. He works at XYZ. They've got a positioning open up. I think you'd be a good fit based on what I heard of the position. You know, here's his email, or here's, you know, the HR link. Go and apply. And then individual recruitment. Hey, you're doing great work. We have an internship coming up at Red Hat. You know, here, let me get you the internal link. You know, things like that can help. And like I said, I normally give this as a lightning talk, and we are about on lightning talk speed. Okay, so how can I give back? So what can you do? You can perform reviews. Even if you're not confident to start contributing code, reviews is a great way to earn trust. Open source is about earning trust. And reviews where you give your +1 or your comments of, you know, hey, I noticed this typo, you know, you're building trust within the community. Help grow the community, whether it's providing code, whether it's saying, hey, I joined this really great community. I think you'd enjoy it. Why don't you come contribute as well? Promote diversity and inclusion. I'm going to say that all the time because the more diverse we have, the more thought process we have, the better the code is, the more corner cases we know about, because everyone thinks differently, everyone contributes differently. There are mentoring opportunities available. So sometimes a project has internal project mentoring. It can be one-on-one, or what's become kind of popular lately is cohort mentoring. So it could be 1 or 2 mentors with 3 to 6 mentees. The idea also being with the cohorts is y'all mentor each other. External mentoring programs, and these sometimes are paid. Outreachy. I know currently Outreachy is accepting projects. I do not believe they are in the mentee recruitment stage yet, but don't hold me to that. Check out Outreachy's website. Google Summer of Code and or Docs. Sometimes Docs is run, sometimes it is not. But that's another great opportunity through Google. Different projects participate in that. I know there was a recent announcement, so it may be underway already, but it may be underway already for you to apply your project and not necessarily to become a mentee. So again, if you're interested in something like that, go ahead and check out Google. All right, so questions.
Structure. Oh, thank you. Oh, sorry. About the impact of photos within a digital community. So, I've noticed that there are some places that require photos to be part of it or heavily suggest it, and some folks want to have photos included. Some people don't. Do you have a recommendation on an ideal strategy that would draw folks in who do want to have their picture on there, who don't want to have their picture on there, and how to help them feel safe?
Okay, so I'll go back to the dark ages. My user ID, as I mentioned on IRC, is spots. If you did not know me, you didn't know if I was male or female, and I was just accepted in the community for who I was. Even went to dinner one night with a coworker from Rackspace who looked over at me and said, Spots, I'm working on the list of people for the Meal, what's your real name? We'd been working together for over a year. So sometimes anonymity works to your advantage because as someone who is a minority or a female, it allows you to be taken at face value, which oddly, as we're talking pictures. So in OpenStack, it would be totally optional whether you want your picture up there or not. For the longest time, I did not have a picture up on LinkedIn. In our internal IRC, I have one of my dogs dock diving. So it's all your comfort level. And I think it should be optional, and it should be your choice. He's bringing the mic up. It's also weird not to be like roaming
Sorry,
around.
making you run. First, thanks for the topics and your story, and it's inspiring. And I've been a user of Fedora Linux for a long time. I haven't, and I need to go to the booth. I'll have to sneak out there and get those badges, or the badge. I've kind of just been a lurker. I'm curious, like with OpenStack, what was your story? How did you get involved? Were you a user? Were you an administrator? Was that your path to Red Hat? I'm just curious how this all
It kind of was. So I'll go over my, if we talked about resumes earlier, my resume is like 10 pages long. I like to say that I've been involved in OpenStack since before it was cool. So I don't date myself, but it's been a while. So I worked at a company called AlertSite, which did monitoring. And we decided we wanted to run an OpenStack cloud on Grizzly. That was the current version. There was no documentation. It was very, very painful. But from that experience, I was hired by Rackspace. I was brought into an internal support team. I was bored. I was doing some of the, I'll say the system administration operations for the Barbican project folks. And they're like, well, Amy, if you're bored, we could use this help with the translations, tagging. So when I was bored, which I often am, my mind runs constantly, I got involved as a contributor. I started going to the Women of OpenStack. And I just went to an imposter syndrome talk from Major Hayden, if anyone's ever heard of him. He's one of the greatest people on the face of the planet if you've never met Major. But if someone who had a badge sticker at Rackspace and his picture on the wall was talking about imposter syndrome and the need to step up, I realized that if I did not step up to start talking and taking leadership roles, there was not going to be a female in the room. And OpenStack is, like I said, Women of OpenStack was an org at the time. It's now the Diversity and Inclusion Working Group. But so that was a project that was very welcoming and inclusive. But I realized that if I didn't start going and giving talks, there wasn't going to be females on the stage. So through that, I ended up, when I left Rackspace, I went to teach OpenStack. And I just kept taking more and more leadership roles in the community. I was chair of the user group because I came from an operator background. And then joined the TC, got on the board. When I was elected to the board, I was not working for a company and using OpenStack. I had decided that I wanted community manager on my resume, so I went to work for an open source company in Luxembourg, remotely. I did not move to Luxembourg. But that's another thing. If you see a job position in another country or somewhere, contact them. See if they're remote friendly. And a lot of open source companies are, especially smaller ones. As far as a developer, I started watching things on channels, then doing reviews, then running a meeting, and then became a core reviewer. So if you're willing to do the work, you have paths forward. Fedora is a great community for contributions. Their events, their ability to give travel support to events. Go downstairs and talk to the team. They're all volunteers down there, except maybe Sean from the CentOS community.
Our open project has a different policy than what you stated twice. We are welcoming, open, and a great party. Too often, diversity and inclusion has been used as a weapon, and it's neither diverse of thought or inclusive if people don't like you. I'd rather have welcoming, open, regardless of whatever you feel, your ideology, whatever, and a great party.
Yeah, so like I said, I mean, I got involved in it. Everyone just knew me as Spots. So I earned the trust based on what I brought to the table. No, but open source is about earning trust, and I know some other communities are harder. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you're doing the work and you're showing, that you're open to feedback and other things, you do earn trust. And if you give good feedback on other people's codes, you earn trust. Question in the back.
All right. Okay. Yeah. We have a project. We have muses right now. We just have sort of us two just working on it. So how do we get from a sort of unstructured project with two devs to a full community like we're trying to get to with the full community advocates, graphic artists, et cetera, et cetera.
So you are your community advocates. Do you have a booth downstairs? But it can be. I mean, if one, like, we've got the open info booth, and to be honest, we are, even though we have some of the foundation staff here, we are not manning it like we should. We also ran out of stickers. But the ability for someone to be curious and go, oh, wow. And if you have stickers, even better. Sticker Mule is pretty cheap. There's other sticker mules, but there are options out there to get really inexpensive stickers that you put out there. But you're starting a conversation by having that table. And Scale probably would give you one as a little project. Krista might know a little more about that because Rocky, I don't know the process that Rocky got a booth. Are they a sponsor or anything? Okay, so never mind. But I'm pretty sure that there are, if you go to especially a smaller conference and say, hey, I've got this project, could I have a booth? And just start talking to people. Say, hey, we're doing this. Are you interested? Would you like to learn more? Let me show you what it does. We are looking for help in this aspect and this aspect. So that can be a great way to start your community and just getting the word out. Do blogs. It was more of a thing during COVID, the live streams. I think everyone's kind of burnt out on most of the virtual things. So I won't recommend necessarily doing a live stream, but blogs are there and blogs are there forever. So write things up, invite people, get people excited. You're welcome, in case anyone needs me.
Thank you for doing this excellent talk. I had a question about code of conducts and what you think about them. You don't hear too much about it nowadays, but about 10 years ago, there was a lot of controversy over projects that adopted it and things like that. And I remember one in particular, one open source project, copied it from another one just as a draft, and they were really slammed. And so what's your opinion on that nowadays?
Okay, so a lot of code of conducts are based off of Django, and I also recommend before you start getting other people, you have a code of conduct. I believe you're talking about Linux, suddenly the Linux kernel finally putting. Okay, OpenStack, CentOS, Fedora have had some version of a code of conduct since day one. Last year we revamped the Open Infra code of conduct, made it a little more specific. We were missing things like bullying. We had things like be kind to others, treat them like you would want to be treated, we needed to get a little more specific. So code of conducts are very important because they protect you and they protect your contributors. I don't think these should be used to kick people out of your community because you don't like them. But if you're getting reports that someone is bullying and you've talked to them and you've come to a realization that they are toxic and they are chasing people away, they have value. And sometimes it's just realizing how someone comes across in text is really not how that person is. It's English may be a second language. And you have a conversation and you realize that that is why they come across that way. And you work with them, and it's not a code of conduct issue. But if someone's starting a fight or making inappropriate comments at an event, they need to be escorted out. Anything else? Thank you all for coming. Like I said, I will either be outside. If I am in the expo hall, you can find me at Red Hat, Fedora, or possibly Open Infra, or possibly Chaos.
All right, everyone, let's give it up again for Amy Marrich. That was a great talk. I learned a lot about, you don't need a tech degree to get a job in tech. That is true, because I don't have one. Facilitating collaboration in a community is really important. Tech writers and translators are worth their weight in gold. And earning trust. I think that was a really big point there is earning trust in open source and believing in yourself and getting through your imposter syndrome. I think those were all great things. So we've